You're a pilot with a mission that could change the course of history. Suddenly, an enemy aircraft appears on your radar. You push the throttle, expecting to leave them in the dust, but they're still gaining on you. Before you can react, they've already locked on. If that enemy jet happens to be a MiG-25 Foxbat, your chances of escaping are slim to none. This Soviet-era interceptor is so fast that it makes most fighter jets look like clumsy birds. It was built to outrun and outclimb any nuclear bomber in the sky. While it might not be the fastest fighter jet ever, it's the fastest in service. The MiG-25 can exceed Mach 2.8 around 3,470 kilometers per hour or 2,160 miles per hour and soar to altitudes where most aircraft can't even function. Its sheer speed turned it into a Cold War nightmare for the US. But how did the Soviets create such a monster? The truth is, they didn't have much of a choice. The Cold War arms race. In the 60s, the US unveiled the Lockheed A-12, a high-speed reconnaissance plane that evolved into the SR-71 Blackbird. This aircraft could fly at Mach 3+ and was practically untouchable. At the same time, they also had the XB-70 Valkyrie, a long-range bomber built to cruise at high speeds and altitudes, making it nearly impossible to intercept. But speed wasn't America's only edge. Their true advantage was sheer destructive power. The B-52 Stratofortress easily ensured their dominance, carrying nuclear payloads across vast distances. With such a vast target in their sights, American bombers could pop up from anywhere and unleash hell upon them. The fear was palpable among Soviet generals, knowing their fastest jets were not nearly quick enough to stop a nuclear strike. It was clear the balance of power had just shifted. In response, their engineers were given one simple task: build the fastest jet ever to deal with all these threats. And so, the MiG-25 was born. This beast wasn't meant to be an agile dogfighter or designed for long-range missions. It had one job: intercept and destroy high-speed threats before they could escape. So that's how the Soviets answered America's technological might, with pure, unrelenting power. It wasn't sleek or flashy, but like all things Soviet, it got the job done. Meeting the MiG-25. The Western Allies first saw the Foxbat at the Domodedovo Air Show in 1967. Initially, they mistook it for the MiG-23 and gave it the NATO code Foxbat. What really stunned them was the sheer size of the interceptor. Still, it wasn't until 1976 that they got a real look at the MiG-25's capabilities. That year, Soviet pilot Viktor Belenko defected to Japan with his MiG-25, a moment that would go down in history as the infamous Belenko incident. This incident gave the West access to the most advanced interceptor of their era. What they learned from it helped them understand how the Soviets were kicking everyone's ass. The MiG-25's insane power. First, they discovered that the MiG-25 was equipped with two massive Tumansky R-15B 300 turbojet engines, each cranking out over 22,000 pounds of thrust to achieve its mind-blowing speed. These engines were incredibly powerful, enabling the MiG-25 to exceed Mach 3. However, pushing the engines that far came with a major risk: overheating and potentially melting the turbines. For this reason, pilots were advised to stay below Mach 2.8 for safety, though many still pushed the limits. Unlike most jets made from titanium, the MiG-25's fuselage was primarily built from nickel-steel alloy. Titanium was expensive, and the Soviets needed a cost-effective solution. The result was a fighter that could withstand extreme heat without breaking the bank. But this choice came with a catch. The plane was heavy, weighing in at over 36,000 kilograms, about 80,000 pounds. Fully loaded, it wasn't exactly the most agile aircraft in the sky. Yet, who needed agility when you could simply outrun anything that dared to chase you? Thanks to these features, the MiG-25 was produced in massive numbers, 1,190 units to be exact, while the much more advanced US Lockheed SR-71 had just 32 units built. You can say what you want about the Soviets, but their factories ran smoothly. The king of the skies. Luckily for its pilots, speed wasn't the MiG-25's only strength. They could also climb to over 27,000 meters, or 89,000 feet, nearly at the edge of space. This meant most fighters, even the fastest ones, couldn't reach it. And if that wasn't enough to make the Americans sweat, the MiG-25's radar was a game changer. It could spot enemy bombers and recon planes from over 100 kilometers away. Once it had them locked on, it could fire long-range air-to-air missiles without breaking a sweat. Speaking of shooting, it has the deadliest weapon, the R-40 missile. With a range of up to 80 kilometers, about 50 miles, it could take out enemy aircraft before they even got close. The missile used active radar homing, making it highly effective at locking onto high-speed, high-altitude targets like bombers. Some versions also had infrared guidance, allowing them to hit targets in low-visibility conditions. It was the perfect weapon for the most feared Soviet interceptor. So, if you were a U-2 spy plane or an SR-71 Blackbird sneaking around Soviet airspace, you'd better hope a MiG-25 wasn't behind you. The trade-off for speed. Even though the MiG-25 was clearly a huge threat, it had its weaknesses. The biggest one was its maneuverability. The jet was built like a flying tank. In a dogfight, it was outclassed by more agile fighters like the F-15 Eagle. At full afterburner, the MiG-25 would burn through its fuel faster than a sports car on nitrous. Because of its high fuel consumption, it couldn't stay airborne for long, which limited its ability to carry out long-range missions. While this was fine for its intended role as an interceptor, it couldn't do everything the other fighter jets of the era could. Today, newer aircraft possess much more advanced targeting and detection systems than the MiG-25, so it's only a matter of time before it becomes an outdated relic. Despite this, it's still a nightmare for any slow-moving aircraft trying to escape its sights. How the MiG-25 proved itself. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, many wondered whether the MiG-25 would simply fade into history as a relic of a bygone era. But despite the war's end, the fighter wasn't done yet. In the years following the Soviet collapse, the MiG-25 kept serving in several conflict zones. While Russia has retired most of its MiG-25 fleet, several countries, including Algeria, Syria, and Libya, still operate them in limited numbers, making them the fastest operational fighter jets in the world. Its reputation as the Foxbat became ingrained in military history as one of the most iconic aircraft of its time. The MiG-25 didn't just rule the skies in Soviet hands. As new nations took over old Soviet military assets, the aircraft found its way into the arsenals of several countries across the globe. We're talking about a jet that was built to take on the most powerful army in history, and now it's in the hands of America's most recent enemies. So, it's no surprise it's recognized as one of the most formidable air threats in the Middle East. For years, the Arab MiG-25s flew over Israeli skies, sometimes reaching speeds of up to Mach 3. The mere mention of a MiG-25 on the radar was enough to strike fear into the hearts of rival pilots. It wasn't until the F-15 Eagle arrived in Israel that the MiG-25 was finally kept out of their airspace. During the Iran-Iraq War, the MiG-25s were also used for reconnaissance missions, gathering vital intelligence from the air. Their sheer speed allowed them to fly in and out of enemy territory without anyone being able to respond in time. This made them invaluable assets to countries with limited radar coverage or air defense systems. One of the most talked about aerial kills of the Gulf War went down during Operation Desert Storm in 1991, when an Iraqi MiG-25, flown by a skilled pilot, pulled off something no one saw coming. The MiG-25 shot down a US Navy FA-18 Hornet, shocking the military world. Before that, no one would have thought an old Soviet-era jet could take down a modern American fighter. This proved the MiG-25 was far from outdated. In fact, some military analysts argue that if it had been upgraded with modern avionics and weapons, it could still be a serious threat today. Just picture a MiG-25 with cutting-edge radar, electronic warfare tech, and next-gen air-to-air missiles. It'd be something straight out of a pilot's worst nightmare. That said, would you take this beast for a ride? I'll be reading you in the comments. The next video will blow your mind, so make sure to subscribe now so you don't miss it. we're bringing the most impressive jet you'll ever see.